Thank you for joining us, Dean Taraborelli. It's an honor to have you here in episode 4 of the Epiphany Series.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me. So honored to be with you and anybody else that tunes in.
Just to start off, the world has kind of been brought to a standstill 4 months ago. So many things changed and so many people seem to have a reason for it. What is your reading of what is going on our planet right now?
Well, it's a complex question. And I think that two things come to my mind. And I think the primary thing is that all of the pieces of the universe, of our culture that aren't working are now coming to the surface, right? I think we have buried them in the shadow. I think we all know, our monetary system, just one example, right? Last I looked online at some point, the global derivatives market, and derivatives is like just a bet, it's a monetary instrument that's made up. $600 trillion. That's trillion with a T. So there's no money to support all this, yet these are entries on books, right? So banks and brokerage houses have these things as an asset, but there's nothing behind them, right? So that's just an example of that. I think our political systems, in the United States anyway, most politicians spend all their time collecting money for their next election. So in doing that, they have favors that they need to do, and people donate a lot of money, and so therefore we can take the whole conspiracy thing out of the equation. I don't know that anybody really believes that politicians represent them, on an individual basis. I think we look at medicine again in the United States, but probably worldwide to some degree. It's focused on symptom management. The United States spends trillions of dollars on healthcare. That's publicly, plus whatever we're spending privately. We have great trauma medicine, great doctors, yet people don't feel well. The incidence of obesity and diabetes and 80 odd percent, David Perlmutter, we were talking one time, he shared a statistic, I think he said like 85% of diseases that are treated right now are lifestyle oriented. So that's a thing that's coming to a head. Our food system, animals in factory farms, food that's genetically modified, soil depletion, all of that. The environment is another thing that's coming to a head. So all of these things that we have been sort of pushing into the background, it's time to pay the piper. And so I think the virus represents all the imbalance, right? If we look at how viruses pop into the world, so many times people, there was some talk that the virus was manufactured somehow. And everybody got all up in arms with that, even though there are many chemical and biological weapons factories all over. Like, we know that, but yet it's appalling to us to think that that's how it happened. I actually think it's worse that it's natural, because it represents an imbalance that this thing pops in, right? That we have gotten rid of habitats and all kinds of things that contain viruses that keep balance. So we're out of balance with planet Earth. That's, I think, is kind of the overall thing that's going on. The second thing, and this is something I pay attention to, is that the great cycles, right? So the Mayan calendar, the Hopi prophecy, all these people that have an extraordinary knowledge of science and astronomy and knowledge of precession of the equinox and all things we've just picked up in the last 100 or 200 years. These guys have known for thousands of years, right? And it all points to now that it's time for a new cycle to begin. So in the background, and whether that has to do with us, our relationship, my knowledge of this is very limited. So I use the analogy of the seasons. In the winter, it's cold. That's just what it is. No matter how we like it or don't like it, it's cold. And in the summer, it's hot. And so maybe as we go through this precessional cycle, the same thing happens. Maybe we just come to a turbulent time. But in some level, the vibration of the planet, the structures are there, they can't be supported anymore. So we need to up-level our vibration to meet the planet, and we can look at the Schumann resonance and other things. So that's what I think kind of on a big scale is going on.
So essentially you're saying that there's a higher intelligence at work here, that something bigger, far bigger than we as individual humans and as a species, this is something which is effectively, making us wake up, have a great awakening to where we need to go in the future.
Yeah, well, hope so, right? I hope so. Because if we look at, I think, Peter, um, we are intimately connected to nature, whether we want to admit it or not. And when other species don't do, we all depend on each other. So this is a part where I think with us, with our technology, and as we do things, the bee population is down. So I heard that they're making these like little mechanical butter bees or whatever, that we're going to handle that now mechanically through our intelligence and our technology. And I just don't know that is going to be supported by the planet. Yeah. So that, I think, hopefully this will be a call for us to get back down to our roots and back down to our connection to Earth and our connection to biology, our connection to our humanness,
Yeah, I hear you. Now, you almost answered every single question that I've got on my list in that first answer. But one of the things you touched on was nutrition, and how we all lead very unhealthy lives. Well, not everyone, but a large percentage of the human population. What can we do to make people realize that almost 50% of their problems are actually self-induced?
Well, that's a hard nut to swallow for some people. What happens, Peter, I think that if we look at kind of the world of advertising, and that we can use the analogy of social media, Facebook, everybody puts up these, their best foot forward and, hey, this is my life. This is a snapshot of my life. Well, what about the rest of your life, right? So it's, in some ways, it's artificial. We've got artificial connections now. I put up on Facebook kind of what I don't put my worst picture of my worst day of me getting, my psyche destroyed by something. I don't push that, but
I can understand that.
So when we look at then all the advertisement for natural food and all natural, and people think, well, God, the government wouldn't let, all this toxicity. How is that possible? And it is, because most food that you go to the supermarket, most food is not even food. It's a bunch of chemicals that are put together that our bodies can't identify. And if you think about food in its most basic form, is information to the body, right? It's information. So just like if I'm going to have a computer that works well, a program, if I don't put in good data, I'm not going to get good data out. So if I don't put in quality to my body, which actually is what every cell in your body is made of. So my muscle cells, my brain cells. So when we think about it, my brain cell was either an organic carrot that my body knows how to digest, or it's some toxic chemical from some big fast food place that my body doesn't know what to do with. And that becomes the building blocks for my cells. So that's one thing. The second thing is that a lot of food is toxic and inflammatory, which we now know affects our emotional state. It affects our immune system, which should be pretty front and center for people. Your whole immune system is in your gut. Again, David Perlmutter, we were talking, and he said, anxiety and depression, the precursor is inflammation, right? So that can be generated by cortisol because of trauma in the past, or it's what I'm eating, my environment. So I think that bringing awareness to people, and what's happening, I think, is that people are so now busy and stressed out, and now financially stressed out. So, hey, I have a family of 6. I'm on a limited budget. I'm going to go for the kind of the least expensive calories I can, which is toxic. So I think it's awareness, and how then after awareness is how people choose to spend their money. Because organic food now is becoming more popular, and only because people demand it, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, what difference can eating the right food, having the right nutrition make to our lives?
It's the most important thing on so many levels, Peter. Again, it's what we're made of. I remember, I saw a picture. If you go on the internet and you type in human metabolism, and you click images, right? You'll see these images of like these complex charts, right? So for your food, this carrot I'm going to eat to become energy that I can lift up a rock, or become muscle or brain tissue or fiber tissue in my body, that's a complex process. It's it's so complicated. You know, you got to be an engineer, a scientist, and a doctor to understand this whole chart, right? And so this is what we're dealing with. And our bodies don't recognize most of the stuff that we're putting in there. So what's happening is that we can now link our food to so many kinds of sickness, to so many kinds of mental illness. And so food is 100% responsible for how people, no, I shouldn't say 100%, but food has a vital role in how people feel. And then they say, hey, you are what you eat. That's true. And so we see it at the sanctuary. You know, I work at a mental health facility, and we're a small place. And typically, Peter, by the time people get here, we get really severe cases. You know, it's very rare that somebody comes here like the first time. So by the time they get here, they're more traumatized, more troubled, more diagnoses, more medicated, you know, and food is one of our primary medicines. And it's remarkable how people feel better in a short amount of time by just changing their diet. But I think what happens is it seems so simple that nobody believes it, right? Because, hey, I see all these things. I got a big problem. I need a big intervention, a big medication, you know, a big medical procedure. And people don't realize that they actually have quite a lot of power. And what's also interesting about food, it's the thing that I can do and I can control 3 times a day plus snacks. And I can choose in those moments to either upregulate my body and my DNA. That's called epigenetics. People can look that up. Everything that I do think, feel is either upregulating me, making me stronger, vital, younger, or downregulating me, meaning I'm heading closer to death. And food, vital to that. So when I eat food, I can signal genes to come online for health. And I can also signal genes to come online for sickness. So cancers and all those kinds of things. Those are signaled. They don't just appear out of nowhere. It's interesting how many people in the United States, again, I'm only using that as an example because of where I live, you know, like 60% of men are expected to get cancer. You know, it's no big surprise when somebody gets a cancer diagnosis. I got one. And so this is stuff that we have more power than we realize.
Yeah. You mentioned epigenetics, and that's a word you introduced me to a couple of years ago, and I would say that was one of the big changes in my life. Can you just explain, if it is possible to explain it on a simple level, what epigenetics is?
Yeah. So epigenetics is our DNA is affected by the environment. So in the past, we thought that, hey, at the moment of conception, you know, here's your mom and your dad, and these two cells come together with their genetic information, and bam, there's your genome, which is true. Now, if our parents, you know, prepared for the moment of our conception, right? So the men were all with the men and in prayer and ceremony and ritual, and the women were being anointed in divine feminine energy, and they were spending a week to prepare for this moment. And then they come together in this beautiful act of love to create this genome. That's one thing. And most people I know, it didn't happen that way, including me, you know. I joke about it. I don't know how it happened, but my parents were probably a little tipsy after a party, you know, and fooling around, and here I am. So yes, we do have our genes in that moment. But whether genes express or not, whether they turn on or off, has to do with the environment. And so that means that, yes, I can have the male pattern baldness gene, but it may not turn on. I can have the addiction gene, but it may not turn on. And what's really cool, I can turn it off. And which is, I've done that myself. You know, in the addiction paradigm, they say, hey, once an addict, always an addict. And I spent 30 years, I had quite a habit, juicy habit, you know, 30 years. I've been at every kind of treatment under the sun. I've been all over the world with shamans and mystics and doctors and clerics, you know, trying to resolve this thing. Interestingly enough, through the process that became our process at the sanctuary, I have zero cravings. I don't even think about it. It's not even a part of my life. And I spent all day kind of talking about it with people, and they're in their ways. And it never occurs to me, oh my God, I need a drink, or I need a drug, or it's not part of my cells anymore.
Oh.
And I had this experience, and I just share it with you because I think it's important. I had a giant heroin habit, a giant opiate habit. I was taking 100 Percocet a day for years, right? So that's a fairly substantial habit. I come out and we engage in this process, and what became the sanctuary process, and I get an operation on my mouth, and I get prescribed some painkillers. It's the first time I've had any in years. And I take them, they make me kind of sick. They sit on my nightstand, and they sat there for weeks. And I didn't look at them and go, God, I wish I could have one, or should I not have one? All that mental fuss that people have around their addiction. Just imagine if anybody's, got in a relationship with an addiction issue, just imagine your kind of drug of choice sitting on the nightstand next to you, and you don't even think about it. And I realized that something was different in my body. I was different. And that's what epigenetics is, that genes express or not express based on the environment. And you can look up the word adaptive mutation to understand this. So our bodies have adapted over time. We've adapted to conditions on Earth. So I need air that's 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. I need that. I've adapted to it. If the air began to change, our species would change over time to adapt to the environment. So sometimes I joke around, there's a lot of prejudice on the planet, right? And the only reason why people have different skin colors is based on their relationship to the sun. So people in really hot climates where there's a lot of sun, hey, I have to block some of that out. People that are in latitudes that don't have as much sun exposure, well, we need vitamin D. So my skin is thinner, lighter, to let more sun in and absorb, so I can get that very powerful nutrient that I need. So sorry to say to all the prejudiced people out there, but the only reason why people look different on Earth is because they're in different climates and their bodies have adapted to that. And so that's what epigenetics is. And it's now become like very front and foremost and known in the medical world, and not so much in the addiction world, but it's getting there.
Yeah. I've got a friend who I truly love, who's tried to take his life numerous times. So he's got some serious challenges, and he's had many challenges. Initially, we thought it was different traumas, different parts of his life, but we're starting to realize that, or he's being told that it's something that he can't shake off. I wanted to ask you, as someone who probably sees a lot of people coming through the sanctuary, do you believe that that someone like that can outgrow this mental health problem? And what would you recommend? I mean, what are the 5 things that you would recommend for someone who is struggling severely from depression? They're being told they're bipolar, and they're in Switzerland. They're trying every single thing for him. And the last resort now, this is the 5th time, is electric shock treatment to his brain. And I asked him what diet he had in the hospital, and he said, it was just the usual food, And I was just, it broke my heart. But at the same time, I don't know if I'm here is it my role to save this guy, or is it my role to let go? What would you advise for someone who's in this situation? Because I'm sure he's one of millions around the world.
Yeah, boy, and I'm very sensitive to that, because that's the world that I live in. And to see a person suffering that's really trying, there's nothing that's heartbreaking as that. And no, I don't think it's your role to do anything except for love and share your wisdom. Sure. And so to answer your question, I think that, yes, it is possible. It is 100% possible. We hear people, if we go back to epigenetics, if we look up the term spontaneous remission. So this happens in cancer. I was going to say a bunch. It happens infrequently in cancer that someone's cancer will just go away. And it doesn't just go away on its own. They do things to make it go away. So it's interesting, if my cells, I got all these cancer cells in my body and then I don't have them anymore, something that's making the cells has changed its signal. So that has to be like DNA is changing its signal.
Sure.
It's an oversimplification, but I think you get the point. So, so we have seen people, like the most extreme cases, Had somebody not long ago that, 99 had tried to commit suicide. When God here said, look, I'm 95% committed to leaving this planet. And I'm here because, my parents or whatever, I'm going to give it one last little shot. I have zero expectation this is going to help. 60 days later, the coin had flipped. They were 95% committed to life. And I still have this little fleeting thought, but it's nothing I'm going to act on.
Oh, wow.
And so, wow. That is, and we sort of depend on that, Peter. So, but in order to achieve that, we have to use a holistic model. I don't think that can be handled by one thing, only because it's holistically how we get out of balance, right? My mind is sending signals to my body, and we know that, and it's called the placebo effect, right? And so you can look that up. A lot of people think it's junk science, but actually the placebo is effective about 33% of the time.
Wow.
Who knows about placebo is big pharma, because every new drug, they spend $1 billion or whatever it costs to get a drug from the time somebody's thinking of it to all the R&D and all the trials and errors and all the clinical trials. $1 billion later, it's got to be the placebo. And so these guys understand that because, hey, gee whiz, they got $1 billion on the line. So my mind affects my body. Now we look at my energy system and my soul. These are things that are all connected. So we use the term here, body, mind, soul, and spirit, 4 different aspects of what makes us human. And we know our mind's different than our body. Many people resonate or at least feel that the soul is important. It's even people that it's got nothing to do with religion or anything like that, but people think they seem to know that it's my sort of authentic self. And when I am either traumatized and trauma is so relative, there's no definition of, hey, this is a traumatic event. This is not a traumatic event. It's individually, how we handle it individually. I think that as all of a sudden it's no longer safe to be myself, right? Little kid gets made fun of for saying something that he loves, and all the kids make fun of him. So he goes, oh, I can't say that anymore, right? I can't say that. So slowly we have to fit in, because fitting in is deeply wired into our biology. And we get further and further away from our authentic self. So now I'm living somebody else's life prescribed by my culture, prescribed by my family's expectations, etc. And then we have our energy system. What's interesting, Peter, is that the human energy system is in direct relationship to the Earth's energy system. And so these things have to be on the same channel. HeartMath spends a ton of money on this stuff. So this is all science, and it's reviewed, and you can spend the rest of your life on HeartMath website learning about all this stuff. But the vibration, the frequency, and when I say the frequency, it's just like in your car radio, you turn it to 101.6, that's the jazz channel, 98.7, that's the news channel. Those are different frequencies. Yeah. Our frequency needs to be on the same channel as Earth. And if it's not, guess who's not going to feel good, right? Sure. So this energy system, because it directly affects my nervous system. And so my gut microbiome directly affects my nervous system. And so, we eat something and we don't digest it. All these little critters in our gut digest it, these microbes, and we eat their metabolites, their excrement. That's an unpleasant word to think, I'm eating bug poop, but that's what I'm eating. And that's what's making serotonin, and that's what's controlling so many things in my body. If these things are not healthy, I can never be healthy. So we store trauma in our body. We store most of what goes on in people's minds happens in their unconscious mind. Unconscious mind is 95% of what's going on back there. So you and I are having this little chit chat right now, Peter, and my brain and your brain and anybody that's listening to this, whenever they do, is doing a million other things. Kind of like if I was going to send you an email and I'm concentrating on it, right? And so I see on the screen, hey, there it's everything. I think that's all my computer's doing, right? But in the background is downloading fixes and upgrading programs and doing all this and doing all that, knows what time it is in every part of the world, checking my email, all of which is invisible to me. So if we don't get back here to the level of our unconscious beliefs and our dysfunctional belief patterns, again, we're missing opportunities. Serotonin, back in the day, serotonin uptake, serotonin, SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which affects an enzyme that will decay serotonin in the synapse and make it stay there longer. So that was basically saying, hey, you don't have enough serotonin on your brain. That is impossible to measure, so I don't know how they came up with that. That's a whole nother topic we can talk about some other time, but let's just say it's true. If I'm lacking serotonin and most of the serotonin made in my gut, then I'm missing a giant healing opportunity, right? So I can take all the Prozac I want, but I'm not getting to the root. So we have to get to the root. And if body, mind, soul, and spirit are connected, and nobody can disagree that they are, if I have a problem in one, it must affect the rest. It has to. It's impossible that it doesn't. And therefore, if I work on all of these things, if I have interventions for the body, interventions for the mind, interventions for the soul, and interventions for the spirit or the energy system, my chances of getting better are exponentially increased. And we see every day of the week.
Wow. Wow. And you mentioned it doesn't take long sometimes for people to heal once they get on that right nutrition. Like what kind of time scale are we talking here if they're taking the right things?
Well, I think, Peter, we're kind of in the fast food society. So, look, you got an anxiety issue, you take a Xanax, and about 5 minutes, you're going to feel better. So we get used to that. And with food, it takes a little bit longer than that. So, I think that people will begin to feel better in days, weeks, months, and that's an ongoing journey. That's a lifelong commitment to eating the best things that you can. And sometimes I do well, and sometimes I don't do well. I'm on an airplane. If I'm hungry enough, as much as I know there's no food in what I'm about to eat, I'm going to eat it anyway, just because I need a little food. There's no nutrients in there. So it's just not the quick fix that people are sort of used to. But again, we have to get down to the root and not just continue to manage symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, we touched on COVID-19 before and the big reason for it happening. But one thing that I heard you talking about on your Facebook channel was how we can prepare our bodies in case we do get this virus. And how generally governments have not been giving this information out. They've been focusing more on the numbers and the problems, and the media talking about the hospitals and how there's not enough equipment to survive. What would you, if you could get everyone, if you were Donald Trump and you could make an announcement about how people could get healthy to prepare their body to create the immune system they need to fight it as best it can, what would you say?
Well, here's what I would do. If I were Donald Trump, rather than have all of these press briefings that talk about what statistic and what this and mask, no mask, up, down, sideways, I would have the same amount of time and say, okay, let's, like they do in China, they have the exercise, everybody's out, doing Tai Chi or whatever. So, hey, we got to move our bodies. I tell people, by the way, it seems that, and this is, again, I'm not a doctor, but from what I understand, yes, a few people that appear to be healthy are getting the virus, but most people that get it are already compromised. So we know that obesity and diabetes, those kinds of things. So what I would say is, okay, let's go on a health kick, whatever that means to you. Let's get some exercise in. You have to spend some time outside in nature. You have to. We need it. It's food for us. There's a million studies that talk about nature and our nervous system and our immune system, et cetera. We have to learn to eat better. I have to, I'd say, hey, what's bothering you? Let's begin to work out let's bring families together and talk about their issues rather than, arguing with each other. So our general health has to upregulate, and that is what is our best defense against any sickness, right? If the immune system is in the gut and my gut's trashed, well, gee whiz, there's a great opportunity. There's a great place that I can, rather than wait for the vaccine to come out or sit under my desk hiding because I'm going to not get it and not see my parents or my kids or social distance and not touch anyone ever. hey, if I can get healthy, my chances are greatly reduced that I won't get as severely sick. And this is every flu, everything, not just COVID-19. So I'd be having these little kind of holistic health classes every day. That's what I would be doing. And that's not super exciting. So that's probably why I'm not president.
I'd vote for you, Dean. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. I'm sure it'll help a lot of people. So, like, whenever people talk about stepping into their destiny, I think of you, because to me, you turned your biggest challenge in life into a superpower, and you created the Sanctuary, which is obviously an incredible place which helps lots of people and helps them see their epiphany and find their epiphany in life. How did you make that transformation from addict to almost guru? I know you don't like compliments, but I'm going to call you the guru here.
Well, I thank you, Peter. And I'll share my epiphany, because that's what this show is about, right? So anyway, two things I think are important. And so I have been through every kind of treatment under the sun. My journey in addiction has had some very unpleasant moments, like everybody's. I've been dead twice clinically. I've overdosed, I don't even know how many times, hospitalized for overdose, how many times. I've been institutionalized, not how many times. The accidents that you get into, I've broken my back, I've almost cut off my legs, And as I was getting to the end of my life, and I could feel it because I had no energy left to battle this thing. I'd been to treatment for 20 years, working and fighting, and however many dollars that was, and the amount of time. And if I had another counselor, I've had hundreds of counselors in my life. And so as I was getting to the end of my life, I wasn't lamenting about, oh my God, my bucket list of things I didn't do. Or what bothered me most, what irked me, Peter, was this thing that I didn't accomplish what I came here to do. And I didn't even know what it was, right? But I knew I was here for a reason, but I didn't know what it was. And I just had this dialogue going in my mind, like spirit looking at me going, you know what, this kid isn't going to get it, man. So we have to give his assignment to somebody else because he's hopeless. And so here, cycle him out and give his work, his assignment, his destiny to somebody else. And that bothered me enough to get me to my last treatment experience. And this is where the epiphany happened. So I'm at this center, and this is the worst treatment center I've ever been in. Like, the counselors are all incongruent, and a couple of things occurred to me. So I'm watching this thing, and I have this vision of all of my counselors, because I paid strict attention. I had a good life, a lot of people that cared about me, and I wanted to get well. So when I went to treatment, man, I worked, paid attention, and I was on top of it. And so I, of course, remembered all my counselors for 20 years. And I saw them pass by like that Charles Dickens Ghost of Christmas Past, right? All of their faces. And it occurred to me, wow, these are well-meaning people. Nobody goes into that business, to get rich. That's not what inspires people. People want to help. But well-meaning and being well are two different things. And I realized that a lot of these people were not, just because they're not using doesn't mean they're not, they're not healed. They're still stuck in the addicting story. And so that occurred to me. But one day I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, wait a second. I have been to treatment in every known kind of treatment modality in the Western world. In addition to that, I've been to 50 countries, 60 maybe, studying with any kind. I heard about something and somewhere I'd go see that person. So I've been on many jungles and things and everywhere looking for a solution to this thing. So it occurs to me one day, wait a second, I know more about this than any counselor I have ever sat in front of. No insult to them, yeah. But I'm like, who knows more about this than me? This model that I've been stuck in, I'm not the only one that this thing isn't working for, right? I look at all the people that didn't make it or still using or all that, because I paid close attention. I've been to treatment with hundreds or thousands of people over the years. I've been in a lot of treatment. So then it occurs to me, I'm like, wait a second. My 30 years of addiction and feeling like a total zero loser, like can't get it, I'm the biggest scumbag on planet Earth. Wait a second, that was my training. That was my training for this moment. And a new model needs to come forth in the United States. And you know what? Who's better equipped to do it than me? So I didn't know quite what to do with this new little epiphany that I had, right? So, but then the image for the sanctuary just started coming. It started downloading into me, right? The whole thing just came. It was handed to me. I'm like, holy smokes, I'm getting a map of what to do.
Wow.
So I waited for my parents to come visit me, right? Because I can't talk to them on the phone about this. You know, my parents, they've been through, World War III on this thing. So I'm, and I could have been in treatment for 10 years and left, and they'd still be worried because that has never worked for me in the past. So I'm sitting with my parents at dinner one night on our little weekend getaway from my treatment experience. And I say to them, you know what, I'm leaving here. I'm done. And as a matter of fact, I am done with treatment for the rest of my life. Like, I'm finished. And to throw another thing in there, I'm going to create a treatment center. And so they didn't know, but what, I tried everything else, right? So the funny part is, Peter, so then I go on my healing journey. I had a house in Sedona, and that came in such a surreptitious way. And I don't have the money. I lived in Philadelphia at the time. I don't have the money for a house, let alone a house that's 2,000 miles away. So I go to my house that I had just purchased online, which is another kind of strange thing to do. But, and I start my healing process, right? All the stuff that I had read about, all the stuff, and I begin I am gonna heal, and so that becomes my full-time focus. So my parents come out to visit me, 6 months later, and I'm telling them about this, right? And they're sitting at the dinner table, and I mean, their jaws are on the table. They're and they're something's different, something's going on. And and so you know what they did? The next day they start calling all these healers and making appointments for themselves and say, I want to check this out, and because look at you, holy smokes, we've never seen you so inspired. And that was the epiphany when I realized that, wow, my addictive journey, and not everybody has, the kind of time and constitution that I have. I'm fortunate. I'm not in any way saying this is my doing. I lived through my addiction by the grace of the spirits and by the fact that I had some good DNA, that, my body was tough. And so I outlived my addiction. And then I realized that what better training than that, Wow. So you mentioned something very important. I take my greatest challenge and I turn it into my greatest power. And actually that's called the hero's journey. This is an archetypal model we didn't think of this, this is just part of the human condition. And so that was the epiphany, and that's what shifted for me. So if you were going to ask, what would I recommend to people in their epiphany? Well, whatever people have the most experience with, and challenge-wise, could be a key to what their gifts are in the world. It seems counterintuitive in some way, but that's often the thing. Hey, the soul has to learn and learn and learn. But once I get the lesson, man, the teacher stops coming. And then I can share that lesson with others.
Wow. Well, that is incredible, Dean. Thank you for sharing that. It is just the kind of thing that makes your heart lift, and also will give a lot of people hope, because, you went from rock bottom to the dream. And I know that it's not easy running the sanctuary, because I know, you get a lot of people coming in who went through what you've been through. But if someone did want to come there to help themselves because they've listened to you and they realize that perhaps you are the person who could potentially present them and help them discover their epiphany, what is it all about, and how do they do that?
Well, I think that it's a fairly complicated question, but the holistic nature of the sanctuary, a lot of holistic is the buzzwords now. It's interesting, when I began, 18 years ago or 17 years ago, whatever it is now, we were the only holistic center. You Googled holistic addiction and sanctuary, that was popped up. We were one of the first non-12 treatment centers. We actually, I think, coined the term non-12 step, because there's nothing, you're either 12 step or you're not. And so we were well, what do we call ourselves? I don't know, non-12 step. So we the first one of those things. And so but I can tell you that it becomes a real experience. We have to have the right engagements for the body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. The way we engage with those things is different on each of those levels. And so at the sanctuary, it's interesting, like I live here and we have 8 people that live here, all of which are dedicated to people's journey. Living in a treatment center isn't easy. It's beautiful. It's like the most amazing experience to see people wake up and to see some of these family interactions and to see people really change, not just have tools and feel better, but really internally change, to begin to have that cellular shift. It's the most gratifying thing ever. But I think if people go to sanctuary.net, and that's our website, and what's really cool is there's a ton of information on there, even if you don't make it to the sanctuary, and give you some ideas and maybe give you some hope. There's a bunch of videos on there, and we talk about all these kinds of things, and maybe people can, and again, if you're inspired to come, hey, if you call the phone number, our intake coordinator will spend time with you and make sure that this is the right spot for you. And if for some reason you can't get here, who knows what seeds will get planted by perusing around that site that maybe people haven't thought of yet. Because what's interesting, Peter, is, and I share this with every client that we have, and anybody that's going to watch this presentation, smart people. And most people in the world are smart. We're smart people. And if a smart person, most of the time we have a lot of time devoted to thinking about our problems. So a smart person spending a lot of time thinking about something, if they could have figured it out, they would have, right? But they can't, because the answer is not here. Yeah. It's back here in the limbic brain. It's in the heart. Our issues are in the tissues. We got to get it out of the body. We got to get it out of the energy system, because that's the antenna to the Earth's magnetic field and beyond. So we have to work in all of those levels. So check out the sanctuary site. You might get some inspiration and just get an idea. Who knows what doorway that will open. And then from there, the sky's the limit. But we're a small facility, and we only have 12 people that can come here at a time. And I know that's not a lot, but it is, our model needs a lot of intimacy and a lot of one-on-one connection. So our people are busy from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, typically. And their entire afternoon is one-on-one sessions. Their entire morning is group sessions. And so we need that kind of intensive focus. So if people are really stuck, I would surrender the idea that you're going to do this on the weekend. Leave work on a Friday and heal yourself over the weekend and show back up to work on Monday. This is going to be a full-time thing for you, because in order to get to the root, what we need to do on any issue, Peter, is we got to get to the root, or else the thing's just going to continue to express in different ways. Yeah. So this is why people continue to do the same things over and over and over again, have the same dysfunctional relationships over and over and over again, tend to go in disempowering jobs over and over and over again. We got to get to the root of why that's happening, or else we're always going to be putting out fires and always going to be managing symptoms. And then I got no energy to get to the root. Yeah. So that's what I would tell people. Like, you got to find out what is causing anxiety. Anxiety doesn't just come out of thin air. Depression doesn't come out of thin air. Those are both symptoms. Why are people depressed? Why are they anxious? And most of the time, Peter, they don't know. And they'll assign those feelings to some external thing, or yes, something happened in the past. I had this traumatic event. It's not the event. It's all the decisions that people make as a result of the event. So I can have this horrible thing happen, but during time, and now I'm in my limbic brain, survival brain, so I'm going to make very disempowered choices about survival, because all I'm trying to do is survive, right? So it's, in that moment, it's empowered because, hey, I got to survive. But 20 years, when this program is still playing 20 years later, now it becomes dysfunctional. So coping strategies work until they don't. And that's what then causes the crisis. And crisis is often the impetus, right? But if we don't get to the root cause, we're going to then become crisis managers. So crisis after crisis after crisis. And eventually, that becomes overwhelming, and we're not going to eventually we're going to come up short on that and take our last breath.
Yeah. Well, perhaps the most positive thing for me to come out of COVID-19 was the fact that I actually got to go to the sanctuary for a couple of days. And I have to say, it was an absolute honor. And I can 100% see why you guys get the results that you do. Now, we focused a lot on people's journey before going to the sanctuary and your journey before. Can you tell us maybe a story of someone who's been through that process, then they've been to the sanctuary, and how they've come out of it in a positive way?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was just recently talking to somebody, and what's interesting is when people are done here, many times we're friends, because we get to know each other well. Hey, we live together, and I live in the most populous area of the sanctuary, right? So people walking by my window, which is these big picture windows, they look inside, whatever I'm doing in there, that's what I'm doing. And so they get a little snapshot and they're like, wow, this guy's authentic, So anyway,
I'm naked.
These guys, so anyway, I was talking to this guy who was here about 4 or 5 years ago, and he's like very elite family in Mexico, and none of that was working for him, like that didn't resonate with him, the kind of businesses that they were in and all that, and the parties and all these things that they were doing. So this person actually had an idea, because in some parts of Mexico, Tulum is a good example of this. They have so much trash, and the rain falls on the trash and then goes in and contaminates the groundwater. So he has been working with the governments in different municipalities to turn these things into trash to energy. So this guy has changed his whole life focus from whatever he was doing now to environmental issues and making environmental documentaries. So what is really, and we hear kind of stories like that a lot, when people find their path, all of a sudden diagnoses fall away. But what's interesting and why I do this and why I think I'm so passionate about it is because when somebody begins to feel better, then they can follow their own destiny path and do what they came to do on this planet, whatever that is. And, Peter, I see a lot coming from you and your daughter, and what she's doing, and hey, to be the best parent, to be the best carpenter, to be, we don't have to all be the president of the world or the United States or some prestigious thing, but to do whatever we're inspired by, to do it the best that we can, and that's what makes the world a better place. And every little bit counts. So for me, I'm not that worried that people feel better. It's great that you feel better. I like feeling good, who doesn't? But what I do when I'm feeling better, because just feeling better isn't enough. Just feeling better. Now I have to go take my feeling better self and to do something, right? So stopping for the sake of stopping, this is why addiction treatment doesn't work. That only works in the short term. It's like, oh my God, I feel so bad. I'm never going to drink again. A week or two later, I'm feeling a little bit better, so I start drinking again. But when I stop drinking so I can start something else, all of a sudden, man, now I'm on my destiny path, that epiphany that you're talking about. And now the world becomes a better place, one person at a time, Yeah. And so that's why I do what I do. And I'm convinced that it matters. It's interesting. I used to think of myself, and I think, God, I'm just one guy, some insignificant speck of nothing. And what can I do in the world? What can I do? And I know a lot of people feel that way. And we have a lot of signs from our culture. Unless you're rich and beautiful and young, which even people that are rich and beautiful and young don't stay that way, right? They change. Unless you're rich and beautiful and young and you fit into this model, then you should feel bad about yourself and buy this or take this drug or do whatever. So a lot of people feel insignificant, and I'm going to tell you that doesn't have to be that way. And that is about the most disheartening thing that a person can experience, is feeling like insignificant, that they don't matter, that no matter what they do, nothing's going to change. And boy, COVID really is brought out a lot of that, right? People isolated and separated from each other, and the incidence of depression and alcohol sales are up like 50% in the United States right now during this process. And So that's a reflection of people don't feel well, right? So I have to medicate a little bit. And anyway, I'm not sure that I answered your question there, but
You did. You more than did. We're all made of stardust.
the truth.
So many people are inspirational. Everyone we've spoken to in this series has just blown me away, really, and yourself included. Who was the most inspirational person in your life, or who has been the most inspirational person that you've met?
Well, I'm going to list a handful of people, if that's okay. But, you know, my people that I look up to and I get inspired by, I'm big into the underdogs, you know, just on a personal level, like people that overcome stuff, man, that's my favorite story because that's my story and the story of so many others. And that's what we're looking for. And the people that have helped me to do that, I would say are Greg Braden, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Alberto Vialdo, David Perlmutter, Mark Hyman. Just those are kind of my key guys. And then, you know, on a more personal level, some of my friends and acquaintances, you know, your name came up in conversation today with some of the people that were in your class, and we're just talking about what a mover and a shaker you are, you know, and so, but those are the guys that I've been with ever since I can remember, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, and when all this was just kind of beginning. Those are the guys that made a difference in my life.
Wow. Well, I think that's a pretty good list. That's I'd like to go to dinner with all those guys. That would be quite a night.
Yeah, me too.
let's sort it out. Just getting to the end now, but I also wanted to just mention something that happened in the first episode where we talked to Pam Gregory, who's quite a esteemed astrologer, and she was talking about having read the stars for this year. And she wrote a book 5 years ago. She said astrologically she predicted COVID-19, but she predicted something even bigger in the second half of this year, which scared quite a lot of people. But she did say, don't be scared about it. If you're kind of on the right route, then you're going to be in a good place. Like, is this world just going to go to what's going to happen this year? Is this world going to go to a whole new stratosphere? Are we and if there is something bigger out there that's going to come, how would you recommend that we prepare for something? I mean, she used the word galactic. That was the word she used.
Yeah, well, we're part of the cosmos. And there's a body of science that I like to bring up now, Peter, and it's called cymatics. Cymatics. It was I think the guy was Swiss. His name is Hans Jenny. And what he did was he put like powder or some medium on a piece of metal, and he would vibrate it, and he would turn up the vibration. So it would start off like, you know, as the vibration got higher, the shapes that the sand made became more complex, right? So it's really high when the things are like, these very complex sacred geometry, right? Imperfect, like an artist created it, but this is what the vibratory field is holding. And so when we translate that into what's happening on planet Earth, the planet Earth vibration is, right? So it's calling for these structures to change.
Yeah.
And the ones that don't are not going to make it. And that's what I think the Hopi prophecy was talking about, the end of the Mayan calendar, all of this stuff. It's a new beginning because the rules are changing. And that's what we have to prepare for. So what I do, and this is what I'm trying to do, and it's not always easy when we are stressed and we have our limbic brain activated with fear of survival. You know, I can either invest my time in trying to be mad or angry or survive in a dysfunctional system, or I can start putting my energy towards the new system. And this is what, you know, years ago at the Sanctuary, you know, hey, the Sanctuary is this really cool place. So interesting. There's some kind of web tool that our web guy got, you know, and like the big centers that are taking stuff off of our website. It's like extraordinary, right? We're some little treatment center in the middle of nowhere. And, but we were ahead of the curve. So we were, you know, 16, 18 years ago, holistic, like this wasn't an easy thing to put forth, but it's what the world needed.
Yeah.
So figure out where the world's going in your area of expertise and start focusing on that. Start focusing on the good. Start focusing on the love. Start paying better attention to your spouse or your partner. pay more attention to your kids. Like, pull yourself together and decide what is important and focus on that. Because in the worst case scenario, I think right now, COVID, if you look at the numbers, which are all skewed, as you know, the mortality rate, the highest it can be is 5% based on some simple math. Here's the cases and here's the deaths. Divide them up, there you go. In Arizona right now, it's 2%. So people have a way better chance of dying of something else than they do of this virus. And so it's sort of like when 9/11 happened, 3,000 or 4,000 people died. Not in any way minimizing that, especially if you're the family of those 3,000 or 4,000 people. So please don't hear that. However, I think the response that we had of going and decimating a country and killing 1 million people, that might have been disproportionate, especially since they had nothing to do with it. But what's interesting is, while that's all happening, wait, what about heart disease? What about cancer? What about the things that are probably going to happen to you? Let's be with that rather than something that's going to come out of thin air that I have zero control over except for taking care of my personal health. So I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a psychic, but I think that what I do know is that all of the things that have been around for a long time that we have learned to depend on and be comfortable with are collapsing. So I better focus on building some new infrastructure, and I'm talking about on a personal level. So drink the cleanest water you can get. Make sure you have some extra water in case the pump goes off. Start looking at what food that you're eating and just eat the best food you can and can afford or can get at any moment in time. Start being kind to yourself and others, and let's check in on our values, because I think that this virus has brought out the worst in us in so many ways, because again, it's all hitting the limbic brain. And when I hit the limbic brain and I'm stuck back here, I don't have access to the prefrontal cortex, and that's where the solutions are going to be to anything that's unknown.
Yeah. Wow. Wise words. Thank you, Dean. Deep breath. If there's one thing that you could recommend the people who are watching this show right now could do to add to their day, apart from changing their diet completely, maybe if they have 3 minutes spare in every day just to kind of get themselves reset into a good place, is there an exercise that you do or something that you simply...
Yeah, and I keep it as simple. Here's what I do every single day after I have a cup of coffee. That's the first thing that I do every single day. I know it's not the most spiritual thing or whatever, but that's me. I will sit in quiet for some minutes. It can be 5 minutes. I will start to think about my intentions for the day. And I don't mean just the checklist of stuff I can check off. Who do I want to be today? Right? Who do I want to be? How do I want my family to respond to me today? How am I going to interact with the clients today? What message do I want to send out today? What's my intention for the day? And then I will go out and spend a couple of minutes in nature, greet the sun, be outside, just connect to nature for a minute. All of those things can be done in 5 minutes. What's interesting is that you do that every single day and things are bound to get better. And everybody, even the busiest, like jam-packed full schedule person, has an extra 5 or 10 minutes when you face it, Peter. They do.
Yeah, they do. Wow. Thank you so much, Dean, for all your wisdom. I knew this was going to be amazing, and it was. And it's really, I mean, it's a huge honor to have an hour with you. And
listen, the honor's mine, Peter. And I respect what you're doing, and I respect what you're putting out in the world. And all I can say to you is keep up the good work. And if you ever need a little pep talk or I can help in any way, I'm on your team, like till the bitter end.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. And whatever you're going to do now, maybe have a cup of coffee or go and stand in the sun for a little bit, or probably save someone's life more likely. I hope it all goes well. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and many blessings. And thanks everybody who hears this for spending time with us. And again, to all the best.